I mean, I can comfortably say that I wouldn't be here. Well, I mean, I'd be alive, but I wouldn't be here at Western Outdoor News if it wasn't for the Fred Hall shows.
I don't think you're at the Fred Hall show until you walk past a cooler filled with ice.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're going to say.
With a lightning trout. And, you poke that thing in the eye a little bit, you keep walking, and you're at the Fred Hall show.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. I wouldn't poke it in the eye. Well, it happened. You read it first at Western Outdoor News and WONews.com. The 2022 Fred Hall show has been canceled. It was scheduled to take place next week over March 2nd through the 5th in Long Beach. It's officially been canceled. And with that news, we wanted to jump into the podcast this week and open up the phone lines. We have our Western Outdoor News podcast voicemail line at 702-850-4966. And we got messages ranging from one like this one.
Hey, this is David calling in, and it's kind of sad that something you've been going to over 20, 25 years, they shut down, but you can go to a basketball game any night of the week or watch a Super Bowl with 100,000 people, but we can't go to a fishing show. Move the thing out of Long Beach. Bring it to Ventura County Fairgrounds or Orange County like they had last week. That sucks. This LA County is terrible. Sorry. Love the Fred Hall and really gonna miss it.
And we got messages like this one.
The Fred Hall show was a really, really good time for a lot of people to come together, and I know a lot of people were looking forward to going to this year, with COVID and everything happening around the world and in California right now. I think it's a really great way to get people out talking about something that they enjoy, and that's fishing, So, I hate to see it not happen this year. Hopefully it happens next year, but I feel like they said that for the past 3 years. So I don't know if this is going to be a consistent thing where it's just, not worth it to do it anymore. But I would really like to see it come back better than ever with a lot of vendors. I knew a lot of people were already talking about it. So I think it was kind of, doomed from the start. Hopefully next year they get a bunch of vendors and they continue doing it like they have for the past, 20, 30 years. So, yeah, I'd love to see it come back.
So this is obviously bad news for anyone involved, and we've all been looking forward to this show here at the Western Outdoor News offices, and we're just as disappointed as all of you guys. So you know what we did? We got a handful of people here at the Western Outdoor News offices, and we gathered around and we started talking about some of our favorite memories of the Fred Hall show and what it actually meant to walk through the halls of the Fred Hall show itself. So stay tuned for that conversation. But before we get to that, let's take a look at this week's issue of Western Outdoor News and the top stories this week. First up, over in the Eastern Sierra, the airport fire near Bishop was contained before it caused large-scale property damage, but the impact will be felt for quite some time. We've got the full assessment of the fire and its impact on the April season opener in the new issue, which is out now on WONews.com or on newsstands. Over in Nevada, the Juan Bass Laughlin Open kicks off March 23rd, and there's a full preview in the new issue. Log into WanBass.com for entry details, and if you're looking to take part and haven't registered yet, time's running out, so head over to WanBass.com to sign up for the Juan Bass Laughlin Open that kicks off March 23rd. Jumping over to Clear Lake, we're seeing multiple big bags of crappie reported at a recent tournament as the fish start to move with the spring temperatures kicking in. Small jigs around the 2-inch size in white and chartreuse shades are reported as the current top baits to target crappie. Anyone into chasing striped bass will be excited to read about the Sacramento Delta Bite kicking into gear with plenty of fish moving around and a huge line side caught out of the Sacramento River on a swim bait. Josh Giordano was the lucky captor and it bottomed out his scales, so check out page 10 for the full story and an estimated weight for this gigantic striper. Last up, as part of the roundup, anyone looking to hunt coyote or turkeys in the coming months should also check out the features on page 12 and 13. We cover all the basics that you need to know when targeting these two species. And talking about turkey, this weekend, February 26th, there's a show you can go to, the Turkey Tune-Up at Lake Henshaw. That's just north of San Diego County. Come by. Western Outdoor News is going to have a booth there. There's going to be tons to talk about, tons of giveaways at the Spring Turkey Tune-Up at Lake Henshaw this Saturday from 8 a.m. to noon at Lake Henshaw. We'll see you there. So those are our reports for this week. If you want all the reports and all the stories, run to your local newsstand or to wonews.com and get all of the reports that we have to offer here at Western Outdoor News. So let's talk about the Fred Hall Show. So obviously the show is canceled for this year, and personally, I really hope that there is something in the future that captures the magic of the Fred Hall Show, and we're able to all meet back together and recreate some of these memories for the next generation, and let's give the next generation that Fred Hall Show experience. So talking about the Fred Hall Show experience with the staff here at Western Outdoor News, that's what we wanted to do on today's episode. We had Mike Stevens, Ben Harvey Murray, and Dylan Dupre talking about our experiences and our memories at the Fred Hall Show. So let's get right to it. The official statement coming from the Duncan McIntosh Company is as follows. Owing to the ongoing pandemic caused by COVID-19 and the local governmental protocols requiring masks, proof of vaccination, or at-the-door testing, we are not able to move forward with the Fred Hall Show at the Long Beach Convention Center. We are truly sorry about this last-minute development, but we were unfortunately led to believe that these types of government regulations would have been sufficiently lifted or relaxed by now. Such is not the case, and thus we cannot proceed with the kind of high-quality show that is expected by our exhibitors and the attending public under the current government restrictions. Again, we are truly sorry, and exhibitor refunds will be available. So that's the official statement from the Duncan McIntosh Company, and be as it may, it's wrapped in controversy. There's people with opinions on all sides of the aisles here, but what we wanted to do here at Western Outdoor News was to talk about our fond memories of the Fred Hall Show and have a good laugh along the way. So we have Mike Stevens, we have Dylan Dupre, and Ben Harvey Murray, and we're going to be talking about our fondest memories of the Fred Hall Show. And you guys will probably have a good laugh at home, and you'll remember some of these things just like we do. So let's kind of go down the list, guys. Let's start with Mike Stevens, our resident editor here at Western Outdoor News. Let us know what one of your top memories was, Mike.
I think, taken back as far as I can remember, and this particular exhibitor, who probably predates everyone in this room, is something called the Worm Bar. And what the Worm Bar was, it was almost like an open air produce market where it had these bulk containers full of plastic worms and swim baits and lizards and frogs, and you literally bought it by the pound. Like, you would fill up bags and hang it in like a produce style scale at the grocery store.
Wow.
And then you would have this mishmash bag full of plastics. And I remember being like, an eighth grader or whatever. You didn't have a lot of money. You could do a lot of damage at the Worm Bar, and I was pretty upset when it disappeared. I have no idea who ran it, if it was a plastics company or a wholesaler or what, but it was awesome.
What year was that? I don't remember seeing anything.
That would have been early 90s, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The Worm Bar did damage at the old Worm Bar.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anybody else? You guys have memories of that? You ever see the Worm Bar? No. All right. So Dylan Dupre, what are your memories of the Fred Hall Show? Just your first one. We'll go down the list.
Yeah. Well, I've been going to the Fred Hall Show probably since the early 2000s, since I was a kid, and then into my early adult life. Almost every year, I would go with my dad. And it was like a yearly tradition. We would go. One of the main things that our family and probably everybody else that goes to the Fred Hall Show would do would be visit the different jerky huts and get some great samples, see how much tolerance for spice your mouth has, and try some different flavored jerkies there. Come back in a disguise and maybe for a fifth or sixth round. At some point in the show, once we would get hungry, we would actually come and buy a bag and then take it outside and go devour half a bag or half a pound of jerky with my dad. And it's a really fond memory. I remember doing it, and I definitely miss doing that as a kid and whatnot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, having a jerky sample or a bag of jerky and a $12 to $29 beer, that's a Fred Hall Show in both hands right there. Ben, I know you've only been to the show once, but what were your memories of the show?
Well, actually, Brad, I took my mum to the last show. So if you imagine this very nice English lady walking around Fred Hall show with just seas of men dressed in camo. The contrast was always quite amusing. And I remember her saying, she'd really never seen that many men dressed in camo in one place ever, which wasn't a great surprise. But to be honest, my main memory from that show is a very good friend of mine who had a couple of beers. He's a little more relaxed, let's say, and he spent his mortgage payment on a bass rod. He just had this thing in his hand, and the guy was like, well, it's a custom, and it's just a one-off, and this thing was like $700-800 rod for just a basic, not a basic, obviously, it was really high-end stuff. Mm-hmm. But I just remember him kind of having a 30-second internal dilemma of do I pay my mortgage or do I buy my bass rod? And it was the bass rod one. And actually, I saw him. I won't mention his name for fear of maybe he gets busted by some sort of credit agency for not paying his mortgage on time. And the other reason why. But I saw him the other day. I said, hey, do you remember that bass rod you bought at Fred Hall? You ever used it? And he paused for a while and he was like, no, not really, actually. So that's my main memory is my friend spending a lot of money on a rod that he never used.
Well, at a certain point, if you spend so much on a rod, you're kind of scared to use it.
Well, yeah, it's like a trophy rod. It's like top of his kind of collection of 3,000 rods he's got, and it's the kind of pinnacle of that. So I guess it's like the equivalent of the classic car in your garage that you don't want to use.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I'm sure people listening to this have swim baits that they probably paid way too much money for that they're afraid to use because the hooks are going to chip the paint and all that stuff. I've got plenty of friends that have closets of swim baits that they say, oh, no, man, I'll never use that. That's too expensive.
Well, actually, bait is another thing I think that for me was another thing I got out of Fred Hall is I met a couple of guys from Fish Bites over in Florida, and they gave me a bait that has become my secret / go-to bait for a couple of very specific species that I'm sure I would not have landed several really nice, for example, spotfin croaker, which are one of my favourite species, if I didn't have that bait. Oh. So for me, there was some quite foundational stuff that I found in that Fred Hall show that has really helped me for the last couple of years. Catch some really nice fish, so thank you very much, Fred Hall show.
Yeah, and I know that a huge part of it would be going from booth to booth and learning that type of thing. I know, Dylan, you probably had a memory of doing something similar.
Yeah. Kind of similar to what Mike Stevens mentioned about the worm bar. I remember visiting all the different regional plastics manufacturers for both fresh and saltwater fishing. And something that kind of really stuck was guys, I think they were from like the Central Coast region, who would pour bass worms, and they were like super salted and nice quality baits. And they would tell me what color to use and when to use it. And this was in my early stages of fishing where I could use any of the advice I could get. And, just picking out my selection of worms and acting like I was going to use them. For the most part, it was mostly in theory, but it was definitely cool to see the insight, have the experts and guys who made them there for both fresh and saltwater plastics.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and always seeing the crazy innovations and things that people really went out on the limb and they said, I'm getting a booth because I've got this new under overspin, whatever it is thing that they're going to pitch, and it might be a hit or it might be a dud. And I'm sure there's been plenty of the dud products that we've seen come and go at the Fred Hall shows. Mike Stevens, what's next on your list?
There was also, obviously, I've been to the show as an attendee and as an exhibitor, and even before I got here, I worked for let's just say one of the bigger tackle retailers in Southern California, and I would work the shows. And when you're working the show, you're standing the entire day on that concrete. You're there sometimes an hour before and maybe a couple hours later to lock it up, and you're just exhausted. And I remember it was on day 4 or something like that in Del Mar, and I was in charge of selling food savers. If you remember those things, they're still around.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the best way to sell a food saver is to put an empty can in it, in the bag. And then you turn that thing on, and it'll crush the can. And if you've got 15 people watching, you're going to sell 5 food savers, like, immediately. And I spent an entire day doing that. And towards the end, I hit the wall. And I disappeared. I wandered off. And I went into they used to have houseboats there, like Lake Powell houseboats on display there. And I crept in the back of one of those things and took, like, a power nap. Like right there on the clock, like I couldn't handle it anymore.
Yeah,
but
long days for sure. One that we kind of skipped over here is that I don't think you're at the Fred Hall show until you walk past a cooler filled with ice.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're going to say.
With a lightning trout. And, you poke that thing in the eye a little bit. You keep walking, and you're at the Fred Hall show.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. I wouldn't poke it in the eye. But, walking past and seeing that giant lightning trout, that's when you're at the Fred Hall show.
Yeah, that's the sorrel booth.
Yep. Every year. They got one sitting there.
Freak of nature, 29-inch, 18-pound trouts on display every year. I love that myself. I'm not going to lie.
Oh, yeah. If you walk past it and you don't stop for a second and go, oh, my, then you're not a fisherman, I guess.
But actually on my list is that Fred Hall is the first place I saw a lightning trout. And I genuinely thought it was some sort of albino, some sort of freak. It was, it's in there because it's poorly or something like this. I didn't really...
Well, it was albino. It was just on purpose.
Well, yeah, I didn't realise it was on purpose. I mean, coming from England, we have that lovely brown trout kind of stream fishing and some of the kind of older school stuff that I've done back there. Never seen a lightning trout in those chalk streams.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm sure Fred Hall show is the very first place that most people have seen a lightning trout, right, Dylan?
Yeah, or super trout for that matter that are just as wide as they are long. It's awesome. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Freaks of nature, but they're awesome.
Yeah, bred for it.
One thing I felt I missed out on when at the show, I was very focused on all the kind of weird stands that you've just talked about, and I totally missed the duck racing and the dog jumping. So, but I think, Mike, can you tell us about the duck racing? Like, what happens there?
Well, I've actually paid more attention to the dock dogs jumping into the pool, because when we had a lunch break, I would just sit out there and eat while that was going on. But the duck racing was nearby. And if I remember right, it was almost like a little race track, and they had them in these boxes, and they would all open them up at the same time.
Yeah.
And it was a duck race. I mean, you cheered for your duck. It was like you're at the racetrack or Del Mar.
Did the same ducks come back year after year, or were they kind of
did they retire to stud?
After Fred Hall, their duck à la orange for someone?
Where do you think the Jerky Hut got their duck jerky?
Oh dear.
Yeah.
It's going down a dark path.
Yeah.
And I'm kidding. But yeah, the dock dogs were definitely part of the show, as well as the lumberjacks. But that whole outdoor area was really a whole other portion of that show that a lot of people look fondly on.
Yeah, yeah. The in Long Beach, you had that casting pond out there too, and it would eventually just be a bunch of guys measuring up against each other, throwing tennis balls at floating hula hoops.
Yeah.
But, I always did it. The Daiwa guys were always down there. We got to check their stuff out. And Avett, I believe, was always down there.
Yeah.
But
yeah, there would always be, maybe it was a short amount of time, but I feel like there was a time where having booth babes was a thing.
Oh, yeah. That was in the early 90s, too. And I worked in another tackle shop back then. And it was Newport Bongos Sport Fishing, which I think they're still around, right? Bongo, the 6-pack, and they would have this tiki hut looking thing, and it was a booth, a full size booth, but it was in like the middle of the path, and they always had a bunch of booth babes, and you walk by, you're 15 years old, one of them always latches onto your arm, and you're just okay, take my money, But when I brought up the tackle shop because every year I would get they had these posters and they would sign them. In the back room where all the reels were in the tackle shop were just Bongos posters from 5 years in a row.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you don't see that as much anymore, the booth babes. But it was definitely a thing for a while.
Yeah, they had their moment for sure. How about I don't know if you guys did it, but the Iserline Test Your Knot booth, where it would be a competition who could tie the strongest knot throughout the day. Stevens, did you break any records? Did you?
No, I tie pretty standard knots, and I kind of was, in the average score, but I went with a guy once who, it was the most ridiculous made up knot I've ever seen. And as it's pulling, you see this knot just knuckling over on itself. And I'm just like, what the heck? And he beat me by 10 pounds. I'm like, there's no way that thing held. So I don't know the science behind that one. But,
yeah.
It wasn't a good-looking knot, and it scored pretty well.
That's how you win it, I guess.
I have a fond memory of meeting one of my childhood celebrities. Growing up with my dad, I would often watch Sport Fishing with Dan Hernandez.
Oh, yeah.
And the first time I ever got to meet him in person, I couldn't have been more than 10 years old. And we would watch his show every weekend, early morning together, and that's kind of what inspired me to get more and more into saltwater fishing. And when I saw him, I was so deathly afraid to go up to him because he was such a celebrity to me.
Yeah.
And it was great. I mean, I met him, and he was very nice, and I got stickers and all kinds of good stuff that I held on to for years during my childhood. And to this day, I just saw him at the Pacific Coast sport fishing show over the weekend and said hello and caught up and whatnot. And
Oh, yeah.
I share my fondness of his show when I can to him. I have a lot of respect for what he's done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you did definitely touch on one of the things that I still have bags of stuck in a closet somewhere is stickers.
Oh, yeah.
I'd come out of every Fred Hall show with a bag, whether it be the CCA bag or another bag that we got getting into the show, that'd be filled with stickers, but I couldn't possibly put these stickers on anything. I mean, there were so many stickers that to this day I have stacks and stacks of them. But any big hauls that you guys got at the show? Anything that you ended up walking away with that you still use to this day, or something that you'll never forget?
I mean, well, going back to the sticker thing, I'll tell you right now, water heaters, you just cover your water heater in those things out in the garage. Or like any plastic like clothes hamper at my house is covered in Fred Hall fishing stickers.
Okay.
Yeah. But as far as stuff, yeah, I mean, do you remember the Whams, Dylan? The swim baits? They don't make them anymore. I think other companies make them now, but they were like a long, skinny, almost like a curl tail swim bait. And they always worked when nothing else, like you're on a half-day boat fishing sand bass and nothing's biting. You can always bounce a Wham vertically and get them. And you used to be able to buy like bags of 50 there for like nothing. And I think I'm still working on that same stock. And I think they quit making them over 10 years ago.
Hey, sell those on eBay.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of knockoffs out there that are probably better now. But,
yeah. All right, Dylan, what's next on the list?
I can recall our biggest family purchase at the Fred Hall show was a taxidermied Kubera snapper. And it was a beautiful, beautiful taxidermy of a fish that would have probably been between 30 and 40 pounds, and it hung over our fireplace in the living room for my whole childhood life.
Wow.
And I recall with it being made, it took well over a year from the time that we ordered it to received it. But when we got it, it was honestly a magnificent taxidermied piece. So my dad still has it.
Yeah, see, I mean, there's so many memories and so many things that we come away from the Fred Hall show with that, it's sad that it's canceled this year. I hope that, obviously a show, whether it be the Fred Hall show next year or another show to kind of step in and take its place. I mean, it's an institution of the fishing community, especially in Southern California. And I mean, throughout the whole West Coast, it would be a hub for everybody to meet and make these memories together and end up walking out with, a bag of lures or talking to Dan Hernandez or getting a fish mount that sits on over your mantle for your whole life. I mean, that's what the Fred Hall show means to everybody. And, it's a sad thing to see it canceled this year, but it is what it is. So Ben, you have another memory you have on the list?
Well, actually, it was related to what Dylan was just saying about meeting your heroes. And okay, I've only got a very limited Fred Hall memory to rely on from 2019 or 2020 rather. But this really goes back to a fishing show that back in England maybe 30 years ago. And meeting your heroes, well, there was a guy I watched on TV in England called John Wilson for many, many years, and he was kind of a combination of maybe Dan Hernandez, he was that kind of guy, very personable TV personality. We only had three or four channels in England in the 90s. We didn't have cable, and this guy was on prime time on ITV, 10 p.m. at night every Thursday for his season, and he'd go fishing, and it was John Wilson Goes Fishing. You go to the shows, you get to meet these guys, and I remember very specifically meeting John Wilson, again, with my mum, because I was like 12 at the time, or 13 or something, so she had to drive me to the show with my friend, and meeting John Wilson was really good, because, and the thing I remember is, he was really short. So on TV, you can't tell how tall people are. My mum's like 5'3" or something. He was the same height as my mum.
Oh.
So this was quite amusing to us. And I think my mum, thought he had quite a nice laugh. He was quite a personable kind of guy.
Yeah.
So she was kind of maybe a little disappointed that he wasn't sort of a 6 foot kind of Adonis. He was this little hairy guy. But that was really great meeting him and getting his autograph. And, just like you meeting Dan Hernandez, Dylan, he was kind of a foundational part of my youth, and meeting him at these shows, meeting those kind of heroes of ours at these shows as just something that you can't replicate,
Yeah. No, hey, some kids' heroes are, Spider-Man or Iron Man or whatever, and some kids' heroes are Dan Hernandez and Roland Martin and John Wilson and all these people. So, and the Fred Hall show would be the place to see them.
Yeah, to that point, I can comfortably say that I wouldn't be here. Well, I'd be alive, but I wouldn't be here at Western Outdoor News if it wasn't for the Fred Hall shows. Like, that's what gives you that glimpse to the other side, the industry part of it. And, these guys are talking about, guys they met there and guys they were kind of intimidated by, maybe was hard to approach them. But that's how I was with Pat McDonald at the Del Mar Fred Hall show. I walked by the wand booth. I'm 18 years old. I saw him standing there. And I think I walked past him 6 times before I had the nerve to say something to him. And when I did, I introduced myself and I said, I'm going to be working for you one day. And I think he kind of laughed. But 20 years later, I proved myself right. But if it wasn't for those shows, that interest in sport fishing beyond the recreational aspect of it, I don't know where else I would have picked it up. Everybody, nerded out in their Bass Pro Shops catalogs and, read the heck out of them, but it gave you that opportunity to take it a step beyond, and talk to all these people. And, like you said, I'm confident there is going to be some other show. I don't know what it's going to be called, but I think it will be as good as the Fred Hall shows were. And we're all looking forward to that.
Yeah. And to your point, with your same feeling of how you felt towards Pat, I think there were some people this year at the PCS show that had that feeling towards you because, well, besides the guy that came up asking for Steve.
Yeah. I've been getting that my whole life. Mike Stevens, you're going to be called Steve.
Yeah. No, but you had plenty of people come up to the booth and say, hey, is Mike Stevens here? I would love to meet him.
I will be at the next PCS show. I don't know how I've never been to the PCS show. I couldn't have made this one, but I'm definitely planning on making the next one. And I heard it was a great time.
All right. Any other hanging memories of the Fred Hall show?
I've got one more I wouldn't mind sharing, kind of about the outdoors section, and again, my interest sparking for fishing. The trout pond. I would force my dad every year to wait through a 45-minute line with a bunch of other kids, and so I can go with a 18-inch string, catch a trout out of a pond, and it was awesome. Hopefully after 20, 25 minutes of trying, you'd get one to bite, and you could walk around with your trout in a bag for the rest of the show. And it was super fun. I love doing that. So yeah. I think about my childhood and doing that when I think of the Fred Hall show, for sure.
You got jerky in one hand, trout in the other, and that brings up too the bass tank. And we were talking about this right before we recorded, but growing up and looking at that bass tank, I used to think when people were giving their seminars, I'd say, oh man, these lures don't work. These bass are not biting that thing. There's like 12 bass in there. Nobody's eating this, the swim bait that this guy's hawking up there at the bass tank. Come to find out these fish are, it's not their natural environment, the Long Beach Convention Center. But also, yeah, there's a lot more to it, obviously. But I remember seeing that, or actually specifically the first frog fisherman I saw was at the Long Beach show at the bass tank. And he's using a frog, and I'm like, oh my gosh, a frog? Is this guy kidding me? What's going on? And I see all the bass, and they're not even looking at the thing, and I'm like, oh man, what a gimmick. Little did I know, frog fishing is an enormous thing and works incredibly well. So don't trust what you see, when you see at the bass tank, for sure. But now that's one of my memories there. Stevens, you got any others lingering?
I've been to so many of them. I think the funniest thing that happened at the last one, which would have been the Long Beach 2020, because we got that one in before, where our aisle is kind of, our wand booth is by the front entrance where that seminar stage is. And I was walking, it was crowded, and I'm walking past the seminar stage, and I kept feeling like, when you got like a bee buzzing around your head, you can't see it, and I kept like snapping around. And finally, I looked back at the right time, and Guy Jeans was given a fly fishing seminar, and he was casting at me because he recognized me. I turn around, I see this fly line unrolling right into my face, and that's how close he was getting to me as I was walking by, and he was cracking up.
Well, speaking of the last Fred Hall, in the middle of COVID, I was there, and I think most of us, all three of us, were there except Ben. Well, Ben, you were there in a different capacity.
I have my one issue from that very show. Still
Oh,
on my
right,
desk.
right. So I'm at the show. If anybody remembers, if you guys were there, Long Beach, the city of Long Beach, declared a state of emergency like halfway through the show. And I remember us in the booth looking at each other like, are you kidding me? Like, we're in the middle of a convention. This is a state of emergency. And that was the first place that I saw anybody in public wearing a mask. And I remember to this day, the guy was wearing, it wasn't the American flag, but he was wearing a flag of some sort as a mask. And people were looking at him and wondering, what is this guy doing? And he ended up being on the front page of the LA Times the next day. And they interviewed him and they said, why are you wearing this mask out in public? We know this whole COVID thing. And he said, oh, I don't know. I keep hearing stuff. I don't know what's going to happen. Well, everybody knows what happened after that and the madness that ensued. But that was the first place I ever saw anybody with a mask in public. And then when the state of emergency was put into effect, and we were all kind of scratching our heads like, what's going on? And I guess we're still scratching to some extent, but it's.
I don't remember seeing any mask or the first mask that I saw, but I remember it was in the news enough and stuff to where that's where we started seeing the hand cleaner bottles on everybody's desk, and not everybody was shaking hands as much, and people kind of like didn't know yet. I remember them not being masked other than that guy, I guess, but I do remember the hand cleaner everywhere, and you kind of took that, you kind of paused before you like shook somebody's hand or you didn't know what to do, and that's where you're shaking everybody's hand. Is at the Fred Hall show. So and then Del Mar got canceled. So
yeah, then shortly after, and then everything went crazy. So, not to end on that note, but are there any other final notes you'd like to see? I mean, what would you guys like to see in the future for the not the Fred Hall show, but just the whole show season in Southern California? What would you guys like to see?
I definitely like the timing that they put it at, early March, so far as it being coincidentally the time a lot of fish species open up for saltwater fishing in Southern California, and when everyone's kind of stocking up their shops and putting out their best specials, and you get all your rods and reels serviced and get ready for the season. So hopefully whatever's to come will gather people with the same level of camaraderie and prepare them for the season. We'll be able to meet all of our industry heroes and all that good stuff, whether it's in Long Beach or Orange County or anywhere in Southern California.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, wherever it is, whatever it is, we'll see you there at the Western Outdoor News booth. So those are our memories of the Fred Hall Show. I want to hear from you. Send us an email, podcast@wonews.com, or you can send us a message on social media, or you can call our voicemail line. You can look at the show description for that number and, record your thoughts on the Fred Hall Show. We'll hear from you next week at the Western Outdoor News Podcast. Thanks for listening. All right, so obviously the big news this week was that the Fred Hall Show 2020... All right.
That was perfect. Like something fell over and died right when you said Fred Hall Show. Clunk.
There's a metaphor there.